Hello. A fascinating question came my way this week. It relates to a verse that's tucked away in the book of Revelation towards the end of the Bible. And it's graphic, to say the least. Revelation chapter 10 and verse 14. Let's just put a bit of context around this, shall we? By this time in the book, we have an evil player called the Beast, who sets himself up in opposition to everything God, our loving Heavenly Father, stands for. And at one point in the drama, an angel announces that any people who worship the beast, quote, will drink the wine of God's fury, which has been poured in full strength. They will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb. It's all pretty unpleasant stuff. And my friend had been looking at some of the passages in the Bible which talk about hell, and this came up as one of them. Now, hang on. If this is hell, what are the holy angels and the Lamb doing there? Because the Lamb is an image of Jesus Christ. We see this consistently through the book of Revelation. Now, this is a fascinating question, and it's more than just of academic interest, because it raises some significant questions about how we understand and interpret the book of Revelation. So, big picture first. Anyone reading Revelation is likely to be aware of the difficulties of this book. It is so full of strange visions, fantastic imagery, amazing events, intriguing numbers, and all of that without any obvious clues about what they mean. We could be forgiven for thinking that the safest thing to do with Revelation is just to walk away from it. And some very famous people have done that, like Martin Luther, who considered it to be a, quote, dumb prophecy. In fact, he didn't believe it should have been included in the Bible at all. So how might we interpret this book? Well, broadly speaking, there are four approaches to it. And the first one is the Preterist, or the contemporary historical approach. Now, the Preterist, or contemporary historical interpretation, understands Revelation as a book set in the first century and about events in the first century. Christians are being threatened by the growing cult of emperor worship, and persecution is on the rise. So, who will endure to share in God's final victory over Satan? That's what the book is all about. Now, the great merit of the Preterist approach is that it understands and interprets the plight of the first century church. Preterist interpreters hold that the major prophecies of the book were all fulfilled either in the fall of Jerusalem that took place in AD 70 or in the fall of Rome in AD 476. And if you're keen to see the Bible in its historical context, this approach will give you some useful insights into the meaning of the book. Now, a second approach is commonly called the Historicist view. Now, this view sees Revelation as a forecast of the course of history. But to do that, it was of little significance to its initial readers. Revelation then becomes a prophetic sketch of the history of Western Europe through various popes, the Protestant Reformation, the French Revolution, and individual leaders such as Charlemagne, Mussolini, Hitler. And in this view, the beast is a person, an evil person for sure, who commands a huge popular following. Now, a third view is the Futurist, or the eschatological view. Now, for the Futurist, Revelation is mainly symbolic of the final and ultimate victory God will have over the forces of evil. The Futurist interpreter will often divide human history into epochs we call dispensations. And they may argue that some parts of Revelation apply to this dispensation, today, for example, others apply to a future dispensation. And the events which form the prophetic content of the book will only come to pass when, quote, the end of the world is at hand. For example, the letters to the seven churches are often held to represent the successive ages of church history which led up to the ultimate rapture of the church out of this evil world. Then a fourth method of interpretation is called the Idealist, or the timeless symbolic view. The Idealists hold that Revelation is not to be taken in reference to any specific events at all. It's an expression of the basic principles by which God acts throughout history. Its weakness lies in the fact that it denies to the book any specific historical fulfillment. So let's come back to our verse. How does this help us get to grips with our question? Here's the verse again. Those who worship the beast will drink the wine of God's fury, which has been poured out in full strength. They will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb. So here are a couple of key questions about this that I hope will help us to understand it. First of all, is this verse intended to be taken as spatial or spiritual? If hell is a geographical place in this era in space and time, then Christ and the angels have no place there. But the whole narrative in chapter 14 is set in some other world with angels flying around and symbolic numbers, particularly 144,000, and the maddening wine of adulteries. And they don't sell that in Tesco's. Well, I haven't seen it. The other question is this to be taken as a literal or symbolic event? Is the author wanting us to derive detailed meaning for specific details, or take a more general and I feel more intense impression of the wrath of God and its effects on evil people? Now, when we read this, quite naturally, we tend to concentrate on the intense pain of having molten rock poured all over you. And if it's literal, then the punishment of fire and brimstone isn't very effective, because no human body could be subjected to that kind of onslaught and live. So the author, John, is encouraging us to use our imagination. The torment being described here is a physical, or has a physical intensity that nobody can grasp except in their mind's eye. And that's where John is so clever. The torment he's conjuring up is more than physical agony. It's a psychological terror. And that's why he brings Christ and the angels into the picture. The sufferer is being exposed to what might have been. I mean, let's just take a personal example. I experience the joy of companionship more when I have also lived through the agony of separation. I know what companionship is like, and it's so valuable to me if I've experienced times when I've been very, very alone. The focus here is not so much on Jesus and the angels, but the person or people who are being tormented. For sure, their agony is physical, fire and brimstone, but it's also psychological. They can see Christ and the angels from their place of torture, and they realise what could have been had they not given their lives to worshipping the beast. So, for my money, in my humble opinion, Revelation 14:10 is less about geography and where Jesus is, and more about describing the consequences of worshipping the beast. That activity results in both physical torture, fire and brimstone, and psychological agony. He or she can see what might have been. So it's an encouragement to us to wholeheartedly live for God and avoid stuff that's dark or demonic. And so much of Revelation has that impact on our souls today. Well, I hope that helps a bit. God bless you. Well, from here you can like, you can subscribe, and you can click elsewhere to see some more videos from this channel that I hope will feed your faith.